The sun was setting over the endless desert when Ethan Cole rode slowly into Red Rock. His horse, a brown stallion named Dusty, moved at a tired pace, and so did Ethan. The cowboy's hat was tilted low, his clothes covered with dust, and his face carried the look of a man who had seen too much and spoken too little. He wasn't looking for trouble or glory or gold. He was only looking for peace. For years, Ethan had drifted from town to town, never staying long. Every place looked the same after a while. Wooden houses, saloons, gunfire at night, and faces that forgot him as soon as he rode away. He had left behind a past full of pain and loss. Once he had a home, a brother, and dreams. All of that was gone now. Red Rock was supposed to be just another stop on his long road. But something about Red Rock felt different the moment he saw it. The small town sat quietly between two red cliffs, shining in the sunset like a hidden jewel. There was peace in the air, the kind of peace he hadn't felt in years. He told himself he'd stay for a few days, maybe a week, just to rest. The first person he met was Mr. Miller, the owner of a large cattle ranch just outside town. Miller was a kind man with rough hands and honest eyes. He offered Ethan work without asking too many questions. Ethan agreed, grateful for a bed and a meal. He spent his days fixing fences, herding cattle, and helping around the ranch. He didn't talk much, but his quiet strength and steady hands soon earned everyone's respect. People in Red Rock began to call him the Quiet Rider. He never joined the men in the saloon at night. Instead, he would sit outside the bunkhouse looking at the stars, lost in thought. The other cowboys joked that he was searching for something in the sky. Maybe he was. A few weeks passed and Ethan started to feel a strange sense of belonging. The wind carried the smell of sage and horses, and the silence of the desert felt like home. But everything changed the day he saw her, Clara Dawson. It happened on a warm afternoon. Ethan had gone into town to deliver supplies. As he tied Dusty outside the general store, he saw a young woman across the street arguing with a group of rough-looking men. Her voice was firm, not frightened, and her blue eyes burned with determination. She wore a plain dress, but there was strength in the way she stood, like she had seen danger before and refused to back down. Ethan stepped closer. The men backed away when they noticed him watching. Clara turned to him, her face softening just a little. "Thank you," she said, "but I can handle myself." "I can see that," Ethan replied with a small smile. That was the first time their paths crossed. Later he learned that Clara was the daughter of Sheriff Dawson, the only lawman keeping Red Rock together. The town had been quiet for years, but lately trouble had started to brew again. Rumors spread that a gang led by a man named Reed McCall was planning to take over the area. People whispered Reed's name with fear. He was known for cruelty and for settling scores with blood. Clara had taken it upon herself to help her father keep order. She patrolled the streets, spoke to townsfolk, and faced anyone who tried to cause harm. Most men admired her courage but stayed out of her way. Ethan admired her too, though he said nothing. As days turned into weeks, Ethan found more reasons to ride into town. Sometimes it was to deliver goods. Other times just to watch Clara from a distance as she worked at the sheriff's office. They spoke occasionally, short, simple conversations that somehow meant more than they seemed. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Ethan saw Clara sitting outside the jailhouse cleaning her rifle. He walked over, his hat in his hand. "You always ready for a fight?" he asked quietly. She smiled faintly. "Someone has to be. Your father's lucky," Ethan said. "Not everyone's got someone that brave watching their back." Clara looked at him, her eyes softening. "And you? Who watches yours?" Ethan looked away. No one. Not anymore. For a moment silence hung between them. The sound of the wind and the creaking sign of the saloon filled the space. Clara wanted to ask more, but she could see the weight behind his calm voice. So she simply said, "Then maybe it's time someone did." Those words stayed with him long after he left. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something break through the walls he had built around his heart. Something gentle but powerful. A few days later, trouble finally came to Red Rock. Reed McCall's men rode into town, loud, reckless, and drunk. They burst into the saloon, breaking bottles and shouting threats. Sheriff Dawson was away on patrol, leaving only a deputy and a few townsfolk to handle things. Clara stood at the saloon door, her rifle aimed and her voice firm. "You boys had enough fun," she said. "Now leave." The leader laughed, reaching for his gun. Before he could draw, a deep voice from behind said, "Don't." Everyone turned. Ethan stood there, calm but ready, his hand near his holster. The men hesitated, recognizing something dangerous in his stillness. Clara lowered her weapon slightly, her heart beating fast. Ethan didn't move, didn't blink. The standoff lasted seconds, but it felt like forever. Finally, the gang backed away, muttering curses as they rode out of town. Clara turned to him, breathing hard. "You could have been killed," she said. Ethan shrugged. "So could you." That night, Red Rock was quiet again. People spoke about the stranger who stood up to Reed's men. Ethan didn't care for the praise. He sat outside the sheriff's office, his hat tilted back, watching the moonlight fall on the dusty street. Clara joined him, sitting beside him without a word. After a while, she said softly, "You didn't have to help me today." Ethan looked at her. "Maybe not, but I wanted to," she smiled gently. "You're not like most men who pass through here." He gave a small, sad laugh. "Maybe that's why I keep moving." Clara studied his face, searching for the story behind his quiet eyes. She wanted to ask what he was running from, but she could see that the answer hurt too much. Instead, she said, "You don't have to keep running, Ethan." He didn't reply, but her words sank deep into his heart. Over the next few days, they began to share moments, small ones that felt like something more. Riding out to check the fences, talking by the river, or just walking through town in silence. Clara's strength softened Ethan's heart, and Ethan's calm steadiness gave her courage. But peace never stayed long in the Wild West. Word spread that Reed McCall was gathering his men again. This time, he wasn't coming for a drink or a scare. He was coming to take back the town he once controlled. The townsfolk whispered in fear, and Clara's father grew worried. Ethan could see it in Clara's eyes, the same fire, the same determination. But now there was something else too. Worry. She wanted to protect Red Rock, but she also didn't want Ethan caught in the coming storm. One evening, as they stood watching the sunset paint the sky red, Clara said softly, "Something's coming, Ethan, and when it does, you don't have to stay. You've done enough." He looked at her, his voice low. "Maybe peace isn't about running anymore. Maybe it's about standing still." Clara's heart ached at his words. She saw in him not just a drifter, but a man carrying deep pain, and a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, Red Rock could be where his journey ended. As the desert wind whispered through the canyon that night, Ethan knew one thing for sure. The peace he came searching for had a name now. Her name was Clara Dawson. The morning sun rose over Red Rock, painting the desert gold, but the beauty of the day could not hide the fear that hung in the air. Everyone in town knew Reed McCall was coming. His gang had been seen near the canyon, and his message was clear. Red Rock would belong to him again. Inside the sheriff's office, Clara Dawson was loading rifles while her father, old Sheriff Dawson, sat at his desk, his face pale but determined. His age had slowed him, and his shoulder still ached from an old bullet wound. Yet his spirit was strong. Ethan Cole stood quietly near the window, his hat pulled low, watching the street. He had spent his life avoiding fights, but this time it was different. Red Rock had become his home, even if he never said it aloud. The people, the land, and most of all Clara, they had given him something he thought he had lost forever. Sheriff Dawson looked up. "You don't have to stay for this, Ethan," he said in a weary voice. "This isn't your fight." Ethan turned to him, his calm eyes meeting the old man's. "It is now." Clara looked up from her rifle and met Ethan's gaze. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. She didn't say anything, but the way she looked at him said enough. He wasn't just another drifter anymore. He was part of Red Rock, part of her. By noon, the townsfolk began to gather. Some were brave enough to take up arms, while others packed their wagons to leave. The sound of hammering echoed through the streets as windows were boarded up and doors reinforced. Ethan helped everyone without a word. When a young boy asked him, "Are we going to win, mister?" Ethan paused, then said gently, "We're going to try." As the day faded into evening, the desert grew still. The sky turned orange, then deep red, as if it knew blood would soon be spilled. Clara stood beside Ethan outside the sheriff's office, watching the horizon. "They'll come after dark," she said quietly. Ethan nodded. "That's how men like Reed work, when the light's gone." She looked at him, her voice soft but strong. "Are you scared?" He gave a small smile. Everyone's scared. The trick is not letting fear decide what happens next. She admired that about him, his quiet courage, the kind that didn't need words. As the wind brushed through her hair, she wanted to tell him something that had been growing inside her for weeks. But before she could speak, a gunshot echoed from the canyon. Then another. The night had begun. Reed McCall's gang rode in fast, met about 20 men armed and shouting. Their horses thundered down the main street, kicking up clouds of dust. The townsfolk ducked for cover. Sheriff Dawson shouted orders and Ethan ran to the edge of town, taking position near the general store. Clara followed, rifle ready. Gunfire exploded in every direction. Windows shattered and the air filled with smoke. Ethan moved like a man who had done this before, quick, calm, and steady. Every shot he fired was deliberate. He didn't miss. Clara stayed close, covering his side. "You're too calm for this," she shouted between gunshots. "Calm helps me aim," he replied without looking up. They both laughed softly, even in the middle of chaos. It was strange, but that small moment of laughter made them stronger. As the battle went on, Reed McCall himself appeared at the far end of the street. He was a tall man with a cruel grin and cold eyes. He carried 2 guns and looked like he had been waiting for this fight his whole life. When Reed saw Ethan, his smile vanished. "Well, I'll be damned," he said loudly, his voice cutting through the noise. "Ethan Cole, didn't think I'd see your face again." Clara looked at Ethan, confused. "You know him?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I do. Years ago, before Ethan became a drifter, he had worked as a ranch hand in another town. Reed McCall had been there too, a fellow cowboy who turned to crime when greed took hold of him. One night, Reed led a raid that destroyed the ranch and killed Ethan's younger brother. Since then, Ethan had lived with guilt and rage, trying to find peace in running away, but now the past had come to find him. "Thought you were dead," Reed shouted, stepping closer, gun in hand. "Not yet," Ethan answered, his voice cold. The gunfire around them faded for a moment as both men faced each other in the middle of the dusty street. The whole town seemed to hold its breath. Even Clara, standing a few feet away, could feel the weight of that silence. Reed smirked. "You gonna run again, cowboy?" Ethan shook his head slowly. "Not this time." The next few seconds happened faster than thought. 2 gunshots rang out almost at the same time. Dust rose into the air. For a moment, no one moved. Then Reed stumbled backward, his gun falling from his hand. He tried to speak, but the words never came. He collapsed into the dirt, the echo of his past ending in silence. Clara ran to Ethan, her heart pounding. "Are you hurt?" she asked. He shook his head. "Just tired." All around them, the fight began to end. Without Reed to lead them, the rest of his men fled into the desert, disappearing into the darkness. Slowly, the town of Red Rock fell quiet again. The smoke drifted away and the stars came out above them. Sheriff Dawson was found near the saloon, wounded but alive. The doctor rushed to treat him while Clara and Ethan helped carry him inside. The old sheriff looked at Ethan with grateful eyes. "You saved us, son," he said weakly. Ethan shook his head. "We saved each other." The next morning, the sun rose over Red Rock like a promise. The streets were still scarred, the buildings damaged, but the people were alive and proud. The townsfolk gathered around Ethan, thanking him, offering food and a place to stay. But he didn't want thanks. He just wanted peace. Clara found him sitting outside the sheriff's office, watching Dusty graze near the fence. She sat beside him in silence for a while. The air smelled of dust and coffee, and the wind was calm again. "You could leave now," she said softly. "You've done your part." Ethan looked at her, a faint smile on his lips. "Maybe I could, but for once I don't want to." Clara turned toward him, her eyes shining. "Then stay." He looked away for a moment, as if weighing the past and the future. "You know," he said quietly, "I came here looking for peace. I thought it meant being alone. But maybe peace isn't about being alone. Maybe it's about finding the one person who makes you stop running." Clara's heart softened. She reached out and gently touched his hand. "Then I hope you found it." Ethan looked at her and smiled, a real smile, the kind he hadn't felt in years. "I think I have." From that day on, Ethan Cole wasn't the quiet stranger anymore. He stayed in Red Rock, helping rebuild what the fight had destroyed. He worked beside Clara and her father, rode out with the ranchers, and slowly became part of the town's story. At night, he and Clara would walk through the empty streets, talking under the stars. Sometimes they said nothing at all, just listened to the wind and the soft sound of life returning to the town they had fought for. Months passed, and the fear that once filled Red Rock faded. People began to smile again, children played in the streets, and the air carried laughter instead of gunfire. Ethan often stood at the edge of town, looking at the red cliffs glowing under the evening sun. Every time he saw them, he was reminded of how far he had come. One evening, Clara joined him there. "You're quiet tonight," she said softly. He smiled. "I'm thinking." "About what?" "About how peace finally found me," he said. "And how it looked nothing like I expected." She smiled back. "How does it look then?" He turned to her, his eyes warm and steady. "Like you." The wind moved gently around them, carrying the smell of sage and the soft hum of life. For the first time in years, Ethan felt no need to run, no ghosts to chase. The lonely cowboy who once wandered through endless towns had found his place, not just a home, but a heart that made him whole. And as the stars lit up the night sky over Red Rock, the quiet man and the brave woman stood side by side, finally at peace, together.